So here we go with the next installment in the ongoing series of the game Order and Opportunity Making of the Post-Cold War World Order, where the forum plays against the designer. The EU turn is at hand, and so here's the EU hand of cards. The instructions from the forum were to focus on economic expansion, EU expansion. So for that, let's take a mulligan and hope that we get a couple of more economic cards. So here we get rid of some cultural cards and draw replacements, a military and a cultural. So unfortunately we actually didn't get the economic cards that we badly needed, but there's a way forward nonetheless. Given what the EU hand is, let's go on and play these two political suit cards. And as a consequence, the terror threat level in the European Union increases, so we indicate this here on the player mat. And the first card we use here to increase the EU political influence in North Africa, with an eye on picking up the oil opportunity token later on. Also, we now trigger the momentum effect here of this card, since we establish control in North Africa. Therefore, we grab the token or the counter here and slide it under the cylinder there to remind us that the EU can take a second command. The other card we use then as a so-called offsuit action. So even though it's a political card, we can use it for an economic action if we pay one resource. So increase the economic influence there and pay one resource on the track here. That's the end of the EU turn, and we continue with the Chinese. So going to the development. So this is me now playing the Chinese turn, and we get the development card, the Palestine question. It's placed down here as a so-called horizon event in the Middle East, and we use these markers here to indicate the effects. So influence can be placed into Levant, and also influence can be replaced as a second event effect from that card. The Chinese turn continues into the opportunity segment. There's nothing to pick up this early in the game, so we continue into the commands. So here's the Chinese hand. Also take a mulligan here. Try to put together some economic cards. We have these three economic cards that we can play as the Chinese. Play the first one for the somewhat nasty event effect, which is to move any WO counter by 1 for a total of +2, or move any 1 counter by -1 instead. We have done this to slide the US world order marker down all the way to -1, subjecting the US to a resource penalty. This card we place here as a reaction ability. This will allow us to react to economic and political actions, and therefore increase the Chinese economic influence in Europe. The card, however, is a little sideways tilted, meaning it's not active yet. The Chinese have to actually pass, and then all the reaction abilities are activated. And with the one last card here, we go into the European Union, increase our economic influence there by 1 to 2, and so next turn able to pick up this opportunity here. We're also making it more difficult for the EU to resolve the Brexit talks once they start trying that. We are now in the position to block the EU from resolving it, or then the EU has to go all the way to 3 levels of influence there if they wish to resolve. And with that, Chinese are done and pass as well to activate the card over here, so that reaction ability is now active in Europe. Next up, Russia. Development. Ethnic violence. This is a development event going into Africa here, and we also use some reminder tokens here. So this one of the event effects on the card can move the Africa pivotal event up here on the track, and you will remember, if it gets all the way to 2 and then moves once more, then the Africa spaces will be scored. The other event effect affects the East Central Africa. You can replace influence there for a cost of -1 on the world order track. Russia continues into opportunities, nothing to pick up just yet, so we go into the command segment. Here's the Russian hand. Also take a mulligan here, try to establish a little bit better hand. Russians get 3 cultural cards. So let's proceed to play those. The first card we use here in the Baltic states to equal the EU economic influence. So this is one of those offsuit actions. We are using a cultural card to increase political influence. So it's cost as 1 resource. We go from 2 to 1. The idea here is to block the EU from resolving the Bronze Knight with 2 levels of economic influence. They would have been in the position to resolve it, but we are now blocking it, so putting some conditions on what's happening. Also, playing a political action in Europe entitles the Chinese to a reaction by virtue of the card that they just placed and activated by passing. So China may increase their economic influence in the EU. They choose to use the reaction, in Europe they will react with placing economic influence, and they do so here in the Balkans. And finally, with the last card, we place it for its reaction ability here into Europe. Again, the card is first inactive before we have passed. There's one more Russian card here which we use to take 2 resources. And Russia also passes, so we activate the reaction ability up here and are ready to add military influence or take the contest action, which removes opposing influence as a reaction. So now we've seen 1 command by each power. Now the turn order goes back around to the US, who are still entitled to take another command, followed by the EU. Meanwhile, the authoritarians have already passed, but on the other hand, we've got nice reaction abilities in place here, so that may help us get some actions in even while we have passed.